The gentleman from Minnesota, or gentleman from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr.
I'm
Chair.
guided by the minority ranking member in this regard.
Well, first of all, let me just say that I share my colleagues' strong concerns about the legislation before us that has been expressed already. First and foremost, I don't believe that this will put an end to the bailouts, and rather it could and very well likely will increase future bailouts on the backs of the taxpayer. By creating institutions that will be deemed too big to fail, we are absolutely implying that those financial companies will be sheltered by access with a federal safety net. Now, those are not my words. Those are the words from a statement made by former Federal Reserve Chairman and Presidential Advisor Paul Volcker. Mr. Volcker also raised concern that this legislation would extend to bailing out institutions that go far beyond the financial sector. And we've certainly seen what happened with AIG, with General Motors, and other taxpayer bailouts. We have to end that culture of Washington bailouts. I think it's also worth mentioning that when we create institutions that are deemed too big to fail, we also create those that are too small to save. And it's unacceptable to have a two-tiered economic system where the government is going to be picking winners and losers, and we're codifying that into law. So I'm concerned in the draft legislation the bill does not ensure shelter for companies from being swayed by the political winds like we saw in previous rounds of bailouts. I also individually have a concern about what this bill could do and will do to charitable institutions in my district. The bill will dismantle fraternal benefit societies and harm not-for-profit membership organizations that do a lot of important work in my district, meeting the needs in the community that would otherwise go unmet. The bill would also harm companies in my district that absolutely need access to capital right now and provide credit for the sale of their own products. The changes made in the bill would prevent companies from telling their own customers about credit and other financing opportunities that they offer. And we've heard in testimony before the committee that this bill will harm the consumers of these companies and make goods and services much more difficult to get. In a time when businesses are having that extraordinary difficult time of obtaining credit, getting access to credit, it does not make sense to me that we would actually further slow job growth. The bottom line is, I think, as we look through the draft legislation and between the restrictions on capital, the jobs that this legislation could potentially cost, and the continued taxpayer bailouts, I'm not a fan of the draft, and I'm glad we're going to have an additional 2 weeks to look through it. I think the top line message that I certainly hear from my constituents is that American taxpayers are tired and do not want to suffer any more of the consequences of additional bailouts. And with that, I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.